Hello, we are creating and terminating real estate agency as we can continue to develop this agency relationship and further define it when we're working with clients. Two initial definitions I want to review with you is express agency and implied agency. An express agency agreement is a written document that both you and your client understand the terms of your relationship, how long your relationship of representing them is going to last. So when it starts, when it ends, and all those conditions of what you're going to do for them. It might disclose that you are going to have single agency unless a dual agency presents itself, in which at that time you've got to disclose that situation. It might talk about commissions, how you're compensated for your time with them. It might talk about what happens if they breach the relationship. It might even disclose that you are not an attorney and any legal advice, they should seek counsel. It's going to be an exact definition. Now, technically, express agency could be written or oral, but guess what holds up in court? Written, correct? And we've learned, or will be learning, that some contracts, in order to be valid, must be in writing. And real estate contracts, such as listing agreements and purchase agreements that we'll be learning about here coming up, those are required by law to be in writing. Implied agency, though, is when we go through the motions, okay? We're playing the starring role of someone's real estate agent, but we've never really acknowledged what our relationship is. And this is oftentimes when people don't know the rules of engagement with their real estate agent. They end up meeting an agent at an open house after you've shown them 10, 12 properties and writing an offer. And then you get frustrated, right? And I get it, you spend a lot of time with them. However, that's likely to happen when they don't really know, again, what the engagement is. The other thing I want to say with implied agency is be careful what you do. I don't want it to be something that sets you up for failure in the future. So, for example, if you've been working with a buyer and you've never explained agency or what you do for them, or whether you're actually representing them or not. And then let's say they go off and they don't use your services, but they buy a for sale by owner. And they call you and they say, hey, Amy, we need to do a home inspection. Who do you like? And I say, for example, Imperial Inspection Services. So they call that company who does a good job, but let's say they're human and the inspector misses something that they should have caught. And we go to closing and they discover that issue. Your buyers now discover that issue that was missed by the inspector. And everybody gets attorneys involved. That buyer's attorney, as they're going through their discovery process, is going to ask a lot of questions about that inspector. And one key question they're going to ask is, why did you hire that specific inspector? And I guarantee that buyer is going to say, well, Amy gave me their name and said that they were really reputable. And now that attorney is going to maybe subpoena me and include me on a lawsuit, yada, yada, yada. All of those details, right, that go with a lawsuit. And now I'm involved in something that I had really nothing to do with. So first of all, don't give away your talents for your career, let me say. Don't give away your talents for free. But second of all, don't give them away for free because you may unintentionally advise someone on the value of their home or a vendor that they should use. And then if it doesn't go accordingly, will you be held responsible? And my worry is you possibly could be. So please be careful of how you protect yourself. There are three other types of agency here I'd like to review with you quickly. This is a universal, a general, and a special agent. A universal agent is going to be someone who has the power to do anything on behalf of an owner. They maybe even could buy and sell real estate on their behalf. This is going to be someone who's maybe an asset manager at a bank, or it could be a power of attorney, which we discussed earlier is someone that basically acts on behalf of the homeowner as if they were the owner through a power of attorney legal document. A general agent is the next phase, and this is going to be someone who does a wide array of matters on behalf of a homeowner. Typically, this is going to be a property manager, someone who works as an agent, but instead of a real estate agent, we call it a property manager, because on behalf of the property owner, they're not only going to do leases and contracts, they're going and market the properties, they're going to do cash flow reports, they're going to manage rents, they're going to manage maintenance for repairs on the property, manage snow removal, lawn care. So they're doing a much wider range of activities of not just real estate duties, but also managing other vendors and tenants. Last but not least is the special agent. And this is an agent that works for someone in a specific transaction. So if you're helping someone buy a house and then sell a house, you're not a general agent. You're actually a special or a special agent twice. Like we talked about versus single and dual agency, a special agent is very similar to single agency. Okay. But even in dual agency, you're still a special agent twice. You're representing one party in the transaction for that specific transaction. That doesn't mean that you get to be their real estate agent for life for every single property they buy and sell. That would be great, but you would be a special agent for each transaction individually. Now, I have this as a link for you to open as an example of an appointed agency agreement. And I just want to put this in front of you because this is what does define your relationship with someone. And the reason we call it an appointed agency is, remember, I had shared with you that all the commissions and all of the contracts belong to your broker, because you can't work independently as a salesperson. You've got to be under the leadership of a broker or brokerage. Well, what that means is if you're going to be representing clients, the broker has got to assign you to that client. Now, that doesn't mean that you've got to go and get a broker, may I represent this conversation with every client. And some of you might have brokers that do physically assign you leads that come in. But for the most part, all you're going to do is, are you a buyer or a seller? Their name, the name of your firm, which this might be printed in some of the contracts that you use. This is a generic one with form simplicity. And then you will write your name here that you are working for them as the appointed agent. So I would write Amy Schaefer in this line if I was representing them, which means if I'm representing them as a buyer to purchase a property and then a seller to sell a property, I'm going to have them sign this document twice. As a single agent for a buyer, and then I'm going to have them sign again as a single agent for a seller. And then if any of those transactions involve dual agency, there would be an additional form that said it was okay for me to represent both a buyer and a seller, again, in the same transaction, same address. Okay, so this just talks about that relationship of tying me to that brokerage. It talks about the appointed agency's role. We're going to get into that more specifically in an upcoming video. There are agents' obligations. We'll talk about this again some more, but this has a lot to do with It has a lot to do with disclosing dual agency and the potential for that. And then again, this agreement has a beginning and an end to it. Okay. And we'll be shoring up, like I said, a little bit more of this as we come along. I just wanted you to see an example of it, of course, for those of you that are visual learners. Here is how we terminate agency agreements. This is the list. And I would say, know this list, because I believe that there's a chance on an exam you could be asked a question multiple times around terminating agency, or even a listing contract. And here's the scoop. Just because they ask you something more than once on an exam doesn't mean you answered it incorrectly the first time. The exam is not smart enough to know what you've already previously answered, and the exam does allow you to go back and change answers. So if you get something in repetition, don't let the alarm bells go off that, oh, I must have done something wrong, so they're having me re-engage in it. No, you just happen to get something asked multiple times. Completion or performance is the first one. What this means is you did your job, you had a closing. So if you had an agency agreement or even a listing agreement, and it was from January 1st to June 30th, if you had a closing on April 15th, do you owe them any duties from April 16th to June 30th? No, you did your job, you had a closing. Death or incapacity of the seller or broker. I don't know how else to say this, but you as a salesperson, if you die, it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. But in terms of the contracts, it doesn't. You were an appointed agent. The contract was with the broker and the client. They'll appoint another agent. Death of the broker, though, or death of the seller for listing and agency contracts does mean that it terminates. Destruction such as fire or tornado, condemnation or eminent domain, where we've talked about how the government comes in and acquires privately owned property for public use. The term of the agreement expires. Mutual agreement between the seller and the broker. A breach has happened. Someone has done something that was specifically stated that they would or would not do in the contract. They breached it. Or bankruptcy, which I have had happen. I've had foreclosure trump a listing where I had a seller that had moved out, and all of a sudden I couldn't get a hold of her. And I was just ready to go to my broker and say, what do I do? Even if I got an offer, I couldn't get a hold of my seller. And I was just getting ready to document all the times I've tried to get a hold of her. And the bank called and said, come pick up your sign and everything else that you might have at the property. We're taking it back as a foreclosure. So that was a reason for that listing to end. Now, if you got a question about what is your first opportunity to end an agency or a listing agreement, what's your first opportunity to end it? The best answer is going to be completion or performance, because again, you did your job, you had a closing, your clients got a new property or they sold a property that they wish to. Okay, so there is our review for creating and terminating agency. And again, we will be moving on to some agent responsibilities.